It's a fascinating spectacle, and the fact that this is a spectacle is also news in and of itself. This sort of stuff often goes on. The fact that we're hearing about it is what is unusual. So the question is, why are we finding out about this? Now, there are two reasons why the Trump administration is leaking. One is you've got the Trump administration wanting to show how tough they're being, even with allies, even with old friends. They're prepared to say, you did a deal that was bad for America with the old president, Obama, who did bad deals. And this is a part of a big narrative for Trump. He did bad deals over the Trans-Pacific Partnership. NAFTA was done by the Clintons, other bad deal makers. He's probably going to tear up the Paris Climate Agreement pretty soon. So it's all about saying that there are bad deals that have been done by others, and I'm going to fix things up. It was very bad timing for Donald Trump that this came along early in the week. The ball really started rolling when the ABC's Zoe Daniel in the White House press room started asking questions about this deal to get clarity of it from the White House spokesman Sean Spicer, who immediately reassured Australia that yes, the deal is still on. Then the president sort of said, well, maybe it's not on, etc. So that hence we've had this confusion for a number of days. This is very much Donald Trump playing to his domestic audience. He took those dramatic executive actions a week ago to ban travellers as well as immigrants and refugees from 7 majority Muslim countries. He also suspended the refugee program, cut it in half from the kinds of numbers that Obama was talking about. So to have this suddenly pop up a few days later really undermined the strength of his argument that he was being really tough in this area. So that's why he started talking about, well, we're going to apply extreme vetting to these 1,250 on Manus and Nauru, and why are we even taking these illegal immigrants, as he's describing them incorrectly, from Australia in the first place. It does seem that he wasn't particularly well briefed when he was on that phone call with Donald Trump, with Malcolm Turnbull. Donald Trump wasn't particularly well briefed, and he says he's going to find out some more about it. Now, foreign policy wise heads will tend to say the president shouldn't have been on that phone call if he wasn't properly briefed. So is it that the White House's internal processes of briefing the president are falling down? We already know President Trump tends to spend more time watching cable news than he does reading his briefing books, and he doesn't tend to consult with a lot of the experts that most presidents surround themselves with. But these are early days. He's only had a Secretary of State for 24 hours when Rex Tillerson was sworn in this time yesterday. So they're still putting this administration together, and this is why we're seeing some of these things coming out into the public realm in a messy way. It's a complicated calculation for Americans because, well, on the one hand, Americans like to see their president acting in their national self-interest. They also value Australia. There's an appreciation for Australia's role standing by the United States in every conflict since the Second World War. But, of course, we are a comparatively minor player. Americans are affectionate towards us, but they also think, well, sometimes we do have to talk tough to friends as well as enemies. There are those in the foreign policy establishment, though, that say, my goodness, if Trump is going to be such a bull in a china shop when talking to a friend, how is he going to be when times get tough and he has to talk to someone like Vladimir Putin? This could be a real problem. So very instructive to see the likes of Paul Ryan and John McCain stepping in. John McCain is a former presidential candidate, a senior foreign policy figure, essentially saying, don't be too worried. But if we have to have too many people kind of making excuses or explaining their president, that ultimately is damaging to President Trump's international prestige if essentially he's not being seen as being the final word or even a particularly good arbiter of international relations.
How strongly indicative do you think this whole episode has been about the functions and the operating of the White House and how the president is briefed and how the staff communicate with each other?
There is, as we understand it already, Jeremy, a real tension in the White House, which is really interesting that Joe Hockey last night met with Steve Bannon, senior advisor to President Trump, who is essentially the devil on Trump's shoulder, and Reince Priebus, who is the angel on the other shoulder. Reince Priebus is the Republican Party stalwart who is the conduit between President Trump and Republicans in Congress. He's there essentially to try and keep Donald Trump on the same page as the rest of the Republican Party, whereas Steve Bannon, he is frankly, a white nationalist who ran an alt-right website, Breitbart, who is this incredible, he has this genius for populism. It was him that really crafted the negative tone, the incredibly successful message that Donald Trump ran on last year and has continued in his presidency. So that Joe Hockey is talking to these two sides, sort of.
And do we know who initiated that meeting?
No, we don't. But usually in these kinds of things, when there is a misunderstanding, there is a bit of a spat, that is when an ambassador is called and they try and smooth things over. essentially this all boils down to it is in Australia's domestic national interests to have a solution to what do we do with those asylum seekers who have been found to be refugees and have been told you can never come to Australia. So Australia essentially called in a favour from the United States and said, America, we've been a really great friend to you. Hey, we even got involved with air raids in Syria. We've always been there for you. Could you do us a solid? Could you sort us out on this occasion and fix a problem for us? But in doing so, by making that agreement with the previous Obama administration, the Australians then created a domestic problem for Donald Trump, undermining one of his key arguments of being tough on immigration and refugees and keeping America safe from possible terrorists. So we've got two very good friends internationally essentially turning inward and saying we've got these competing domestic considerations. So it looks as though the way this is going to play out is that it'll bubble along for a few days as a process story, who was briefed, who was leaking, etc., etc. And ultimately in 6 months from now, after the extreme vetting, most of the 1,250 will probably go into the United States, just as they always were going to. But by that stage, the bandwagon will have moved on because the news cycle in America is going so quickly now that these things are probably forgotten quite soon.